Yes, here we
There.
are live.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon. What
Yes,
time
wherever
is
you
it?
are in the world. It's the afternoon for me here in Europe, but for our friends in the States, it's sometime in the morning, depending which time zone you're in. And if you're somewhere else in the world, then it's
It's
either the middle of
tomorrow
the
or
night or
yesterday.
whatever.
Wild. Yes, and we're talking about clocks today, so it's kind of appropriate that we just tune into that because we're all on different clocks and some different
We
days.
are, we are. And I think, let's introduce ourselves first, because as we hear, we're going to talk about clocks and circadian rhythms. But I'm Clarissa. I have the Substack called at Heart of Menopause. And I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner. I specialize in Qigong and Chinese dietary therapy. And things like seasonal rhythms, diurnal rhythms are really central to the work I do with menopausal women. Chitra, introduce yourself.
Hi, so my name is Chitra, and I am a doctor of Ayurveda specializing in women's health, specifically peri through postmenopause. And daily rhythms, um, beyond going to the clock itself, is foundational to Ayurveda, because without you, a woman having a daily rhythm set, whether it is correct or not, just having or correct by Ayurvedic standards, just by having that daily rhythm is foundational for everything else, including diet, including including herbs. When you take your herbs are foundational to this rhythm because the body will accommodate whatever rhythm it is that you do. Now, there's what we feel is an optimal rhythm and a non-optimal rhythm, and we're always trying to move towards the optimal rhythm. And so that's what we do here. So we're talking about circadian rhythms, biorhythms, but most importantly, the TCM version of the daily clock and the Ayurvedic version of the daily clock.
Absolutely. And I think a really good place to start is that, we've lived in a world that I would say in the last 30, 40 years, certainly in my lifetime, has changed tremendously in terms of how we live our daily lives. Yeah, we had the Industrial Revolution and we had people starting to move to cities, but people still, in a large part of the world, lived according to diurnal rhythms, seasonal rhythms a lot of the time. And even in my lifetime, when I worked in the global south, go to rural India, it's pitch black. There was no light, there was no TVs or phones or internet, and a lot of that has changed. And so now we live in a world where we really don't see the day rhythms in the way that we did. We're forced into a 9 to 5 working space, which makes lots of things that we do very out of sync with ourselves and nature. And we have constant light, constant heat, constant noise. You can shop at 2 in the morning if you want to, or go onto the internet. So constant stimulation. And that really impacts a body where our mitochondrial DNA is actually tuned in to the diurnal rhythms, to moon cycles for women, and the seasons.
Yeah, I've always looked at it from beyond, an industrial or capitalistic complex. I've always looked at it at how we deal with time itself, how we count time, and counting time has always been something that was connected to the sun and the seasons, right? So we had a sundial or some form of way to look at shadows and during the day, and some form of ways to look at shadows at night, or the stars or the moon. And that always gave us a sense of what needs to be done when and how to meet. And then slowly what happened was is we invented a clock, a mechanical clock. At first it was wound up, right? And so that becoming mechanical, what it did for us as humans is it gave us all the same time, because before we were living on different times, because in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, depending on how close you were to the equator, daylight versus nighttime was different. So all of a sudden we create these clocks and we start syncing with each other. And then it became mechanical, where it didn't no longer wound down, but it was regulated. And then the clock went from being somewhere in the town to your home wall to your wrist. And that's when we really got out of tune with the natural order of things. And today it's even worse, because it's gone into our technology and everything is down to the millisecond. And we don't work that way. It frustrates the mind because it's too fast. It's faster than a blink of an eye. And blinking is, in a sense, a way that we also keep track of time and the breath and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So everything we're doing is kind of just totally out of sync with who we are, with how the earth and nature is. And that disconnect leads to a sense of dis-ease, not and therefore not just disease, but dis-ease. We're not in a flow, in a rhythm. We're all over the space. And it shows up, I think it shows up a lot in how anxious we are, how hard we find it to sleep, how our digestion for so many people is really messed up.
Yes, exactly. And when you say messed up, um, a lot of people will think that it's exactly. And when you say messed up, sorry about that. I just turned on the video and it gave me feedback. I thought I had shut that down. So I turned on the video so that I can see the live chats. Anyhow, so everything, yes. When we're talking about messed up digestion, um, a lot of times, yes, it is messed up from before or for us, but it's messed up for us in general, as a whole culture. We are simply not digesting properly, or we are digesting in a way that doesn't make sense for us. So sometimes people think that high metabolism is good digestion. It's not necessarily, right? Slow metabolism may not be good digestion, or it may be good. And so depending on the individual as well, and their hereditary and their ancestry and their location, all of these things are taken in. But from the beginning, there are certain things that we have doggies.
The doggy. Oh, yeah, I don't know what she's doing. She's joining in. She's telling you that her metabolism works fine. She eats like a dog should eat. She eats all the time, because that's what a dog does.
But that's a dog. A dog has its own rhythm, and cows have their own rhythms with 3 stomachs. So we humans have our own rhythm, and all of these things are based on the solar energy that is out there. And so that's kind of where we're coming from. I just wanted to do a little aside um, into what does Chinese medicine measure in terms of the daily rhythm? What is it looking at? What does Ayurveda look at in terms of the daily rhythm? Because they're two different things. And what current science or the current culture is looking at?
Yeah, so I mean, Chinese medicine has quite a well-defined clock that is divided into 2-hour segments. Each of those segments is related to one of the 5 elements, and we've talked about those: wood, metal, earth, water, and fire. And then within that, each segment is also each subdivision. So the 24 segments in total, each one of those 1-hour segments is connected to an organ. So, so you have, and there's a movement of the organs around all the time. So it's moving around that organ system. So, and that then directs the activities of the day. So if you have a particular organ, and then it will generally give you some guidance around whether you should be, eating, meditating, emptying your bowels, eating less, drinking less. It gives you a sort of a guidance on a pattern of living. So if I take, for example, the morning, so if we start most people are waking up between kind of a 5 to 7, then the organ is the large intestine. And it's an up energy. So it's actually metal. Metal is about up and release. So the advice first thing in the morning is that you should wake up, go to the bathroom and do your necessary, sort of emptying of your bowels, and then find a little time to get your mind settled, which is to meditate. That's the first advice of the morning. And then as we move through the morning and up towards the noon when the sun is highest, we've got continual rising of yang energy. And it really then begins with, having gone from the large intestines, you move to the stomach and the spleen. So we're here advising people that they should have breakfast. And breakfast is itself a whole topic we could talk about, breakfast and not eating breakfast. The Chinese medicine would advise people to eat breakfast, to start working on having meditated. You then can do concentrated thought work, and then you move to the stomach. So you more rising chi and clear thinking work. So you see that up energy, up towards the head. That's the kind of work you should be doing. And you should be eating your major meals in the morning part of the day. And then obviously as you flip past the middle of the day, which is, the heart, and we talked about summer and heart systems and that last week, if people
May
joined
I
us,
may I interrupt?
lots of fire, lots of energy.
I think that I love that we're getting into specifics, but let's pull back just a tiny bit so that so that people can understand that we're talking about two different systems, because those people who understand Ayurveda are going, wait a second, that looks the same. And yes, it does look the same. So just to clarify, in Chinese medicine, we're looking at 2-hour time blocks and the energy that's moving through each of these organ systems. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. So in Ayurveda, so when you're talking energy, you're talking chi, right? You're
We're
talking
talking
life
chi.
force.
We're talking the rising of chi. So chi is moving upwards, which is then more, things that are more in the mental sphere. There's more heat, if we like, in the system. So you've got a more active digestive system. You should be more alert as a person. You should be trying to make most of your activities in the sort of up sphere. So if you want to exercise hard, eat big meals, do your complicated mental stuff, then that's what mornings up till the sort of just past midday are about.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I understand that, and I just want to compare that to the Ayurvedic perspective. And so in Ayurveda, we are looking at, we're not tracking the energy, the life force of energy, of our personal energy, so much as we're tracking the life force of the world itself, in terms of we're tracking the sun and the daylight and the nighttime.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we were to live in a world where day and night are equal, then what we do is we can divide the clock into, or the day into 3-hour blocks. And that's how the Ayurvedic perspective looks at it. And these 3-hour blocks are connected with, excuse me, these 3-hour blocks are connected with it becomes 12 hours during the day, 12 hours during the night.
Yeah.
And it changes, of course, depending on where you're living and the season. And so what we're doing, because we're tracking the sun, these 3-hour blocks are each connected to one of the three doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And if and these doshas are buckets, I would say, functional buckets of qualities and functions. So if you looked at that, and this is where it's similar to Chinese medicine. So during the time of day where there is most sun, which normally we would say from 10 to 2, we call that pitta time. And pitta, and this, so that's during the day. 10 to 2 p.m. is also pitta time. So they correspond. And so at that time, because the sun is at its highest, the sun and pitta, what they do is they transform. They're using heat to transform. So that is the biggest function of the day. And so what we're doing at that time during the day is we're transforming food into energy, bodily tissue, right? And at night, we're transforming thought into into experience and into something else. So we start with that block of time, and then after that, because when pitta is also about heat, so when heat rises, it usually will dry things out. So the next phase is vata time. So vata is known as dry, and what that does is it's also the quality of movement. So when we're looking at movement, we're also looking at rest. So movement and rest is kind of uh, it's the same energy, but a different side of the coin. Just as heat and cold, same energy, different sides. And so the afternoon block, which is from 2 to 6 p.m. or 2 to 6 a.m. So when we look at what we need to do in the morning, be 2 to 6 a.m., we're moving thoughts, so we're getting most of our REM, our
Right.
sleep dream is happening there. But by 6 a.m., usually the sun is up. So we need to get moving at that point in time. And the movement means any kind of movement, including the bowels. Right? So we're moving,
Yeah.
we're moving the bowels. We're doing the things. So that's a great time. And then the last 3 hour blocks are kapha time. It's about stability. So between 6 and 10 in the evening and 6 and 10 in the morning, that's when we're doing our more stable work of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And resting in a way that is nurturing to ourselves.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of similarity. So as I said in the morning, there's a lot of up energy and Chinese medicine, a lot of mental energy in the morning. But as we get past the peak of the day, when we really have plenty of energy, we then begin to see that we get um, into a lower energy. You go into the yin phase. I think the thing that's interesting here is that we see the afternoons as about storing nutrients after your major meals. So breakfast and lunch are seen as major meals. In the afternoon, the body should be then storing these nutrients. And you should be beginning to move from active mental work to maybe more work study work rather than the high concentration. And then from sort of 7 onwards, we're winding down. Main meals 5, last meal of the day, a lighter meal 5 to 7. And then you go into a winding down phase, which is when we should rest, restore. The body then is storing energy. And in the middle of the night, that's sort of 12 till 3-ish, those kind of slots, 1 till 3, that's when the liver's working. That's when the liver's doing its detoxification function. We are, having cellular repair. And then the period in that sort of 3 till 5 till we wake up is the time of deep sleep. It's actually the long, long time the body. So it's interesting that the body is kind of moving, and so you've got activities and the body doing what it needs to make sure that it's woken up, released, detoxified, released things, added in nutrients, and then gone to a more of a resting phase. And it sort of moves in a circle like that through the organ systems.
Yeah.
And the different energies of that.
Can you explain the organ systems of Chinese medicine? I know we've done this once before,
Yeah.
but I think because we speak English and you're talking liver or lungs, I think of it as specific organs. And then I'd like to talk about the Ayurvedic version of those organ systems.
Exactly. And I think it's good for people to understand that Chinese medicine has 5 essential organ systems. And they are start with the upper part of the body, you've got the lung system, but the lung also has the lungs in themselves, and then they've got the large intestine, which doesn't sound like it makes sense, but these are kind of things where we release in different ways. And then we have the spleen stomach system. Of course, we never talk about the spleen in Western terms as something we think you can live without, but it's a vital organ in Chinese medicine. It's the one that actually helps to take qi energy from our food and move that around the body. And the stomach's job is to rot food, to take food and then start to move it out of the system. We then have the heart system, which is the heart and its surround, which is the pericardium. And then it's its sort of its twin organ, the small intestine. And then we've got the bladder, kidney, and they really mean the kidneys, but the whole urogenitory system, including the kidneys, the bladder, and the adrenals and the reproductive organs. So those are the organ systems. And then that's in its simplest form. Then they have other body parts associated with them. So and then there's the liver and gallbladder. But then we have sister organs. So, for example, the bones are connected to the kidney system. So we can understand that when that system weakens as we get older, osteoporosis is a potential fallout there. The lungs have the sinews and the tendons, so the flexibility of the body, like a tree, because they're ruled by an element which is wood. And then we have visual organs. So each one has a sense organ. And then they can be connected also into other things like tastes and flavors. And, there's a whole kind of layering and unpeeling of layers here. But everything really comes back to those 5 organ systems and their relationship to the 5 elements, which connects us always back to nature, and that we come from nature, we are nature. So that's always at the very bottom of Chinese medicine, the connection to nature and to nature's rhythms. And then that gets translated outwards with more and more complexity into everything we do, everything we eat, everything we are.
Yeah. So I was doing a little research on the Chinese organ system, and because it's always fascinating to me, the difference, because you just mentioned wood as a translating from Sanskrit into English, element. um, and that is just non-existent in Ayurveda. It's a different perspective. And so the systems, the organ systems, are from a Chinese perspective, I feel is a whole system unto itself. The Ayurvedic system is also a whole system unto itself, even though there are parallels. Just as the current the allopathic medical system is a whole system unto itself. The current medical system just simply doesn't look at subtle energy. It doesn't, it looks at things that are measured, things that can be named, and it works from that perspective. Whereas, and that's why I asked for you to explain to our audience about the organ system, so that we're not going, oh, it's the liver. So in Ayurveda, even though we deal with the doshas, what we're really looking at is flow and movement through. There are actually about 15 systems that we're looking at of flow through those systems that are happening all the time. So it's not as if it's going from one thing to another. It's happening all the time, and the digestion is what starts the pattern going. So so just as you said, you had like these hollow organs and the solid organs. Ayurveda has we start off with tissues. There are 7 different types of tissues, and what we're looking at is excess flow through these systems, or deficient flows through the system. We're looking, so that's one thing that we're looking at. So a simple example of excess flow through a system is the current fad of drinking a gallon or more of water every single day. That's excessive flow through the water system, which is one of the Ayurvedic systems that I could correlate to the Chinese medicine perspective. So we have a food system, we have a prana system, which is the energy of life and breath, and we have the water system, then we have 7 tissues. And in actuality, the 7th tissue is a split between, it's gendered. So it's there's the male reproductive system and then the female reproductive system. And then then there's the elimination system, which is 3, just like the first 3. And for women, there are two, two other systems. Um, One has to do with the breast tissue itself, and the other has to do with the uterus as well. So, and each of these systems, they connect with various organs. So the the heart, let's say, is not connected to just one system, but it is connected to 2, perhaps 3 systems.
Yeah.
And it's not only is it connected, but it is the beginning of, and integral to that. So one could sort of say heart system. But in our daily clocks, we're not looking at this, how how it's flowing, how the energy is flowing through the system. It's all the time happening. And what we're looking at is how the body is digesting whatever thing that the body is digesting. That's that's what predicates the activity and the thought of the day. Does that make sense?
That
That's
makes sense. Yeah, which it makes sense that it's what the body's digesting, how we should support ourselves through the day, if I've understood that rightly. Whereas we're more really responding to the yin yang energy, which is always, this rising yang. How should the body, because the energy of the earth is rising, so therefore we're rising with it, how the body then stays in that harmony. And then as the peak of the yang then turns to being yin, how we then harness that yin energy, because we have what I think we talk about is there's a macrocosm, which is the world and the cosmos, and that's all yin and yang, and then that's going on inside us too. And that's what our body clocks are doing, is keeping us in harmony inside ourselves and in harmony with the outside world.
and
And that's what we're
ultimately,
trying to do. And then I think that fits with probably what we said at the beginning, why when the outside world is becomes so topsy-turvy, we then are affected internally. And of course, we're trying to adapt to the outer world we live in, because otherwise, how do we go to work? How do we live? But our internal system wants to follow nature's rhythm. And that's, I think, where we begin to get a lot of complications.
so we've got 2 people here with us, Tess and Pamela. I just want to invite you to, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. We're really happy to respond to it. If we're, a lot of these systems can be a little bit complicated within Chinese medicine alone or within Ayurveda alone. And so, so putting them together and trying to understand the comparison differences makes it even more complicated. So I please do ask any questions that you may have. So I think we kind of covered the similarities and the differences.
I think we did.
So in essence, the body is doing a similar just to round it up, the body is doing a similar thing. So when the sun is at its highest in the middle of the day, that's when we want to eat our largest meal. And that is also a time when there is more energy to do more activities. So our social construct, with the 9 to 5 job, has also given us the most activities to do during that time of the day. So it's difficult, right? And then of course at night, when we are allowing the body to heal itself, we are at rest. That's in the middle of the night. Again, those kinds of times, we don't want to be digesting food at that point in time, because the activity of food digestion takes a lot of energy, which is why we want to go back to the middle of the day to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what we've ended up with is really living in a world where in the morning so many people skip a breakfast, or we eat what I would call a cold, damp inducing breakfast. So something, how many of us don't think, oh, let's have a smoothie or cereal and milk or yogurt from the fridge. And it's not that foods are good or bad. It's about when we eat them and how we eat them. And so we start with something that's cold when you're really wanting to increase the inner warmth of the body. Or if we miss the breakfast, then we're not giving ourselves the energy. And then we go to lunch and we sit at our desks. And I've done this. So you sit at your desk and eat a salad, so we're not meeting our biggest meal. But come the afternoon, we're so tired and hungry. And then we eat a big meal. And how many of us don't eat a big meal and then sit down afterwards? And so the digestive system is out of sync with its natural energies and what it's been wired for millennia to do. And we're impacting at the other end of the day our ability to sleep and to allow the detoxification processes to happen.
And there is another scenario that I see. So either we're skipping breakfast, and breakfast has been misaligned recently, in general, and I think it's because we tend to be excessive in terms of any health promoting activity. So the other thing that happens, at least in the United States, is this huge breakfast where you've got protein on protein on protein at a time when your digestive capacity is just waking up, because it's not just the body and the mind that are waking up. It's it's the digestion itself is just waking up. Right. And so for those of us who haven't fully digested the meal from the day before, the body is trying to still digest that. And then we're adding this large breakfast, or we're adding a cold breakfast, or we're doing no breakfast. And in truth, if the body hasn't digested, you don't really want to have a breakfast, but you may want to have something that helps wake up the digestion. So that happens in the morning, and of course, if you're a mom, or whatnot, you just don't have the time, and you flip into a space where you're not focused on the internal aspects of what's going on for you. You're focused on the external. And somehow women have to shift that so that both the external and the internal worlds are respected. And then, of course, most of us are now working, There's no, right? So, and those work hours determine, again, this is an external world. Those work
Yeah.
hours determine when we eat and rest and eliminate and do all of the things. So again, we're controlling time and activity. And then once we're done with the work, then there's a whole set of other kinds of work that has to happen.
Yeah.
So again,
Yeah.
we realize, oh, I haven't gotten my nutritional caloric intake for the day, and then so we eat late. We eat a larger meal late in the day, and and then we need to sleep so the digestion doesn't occur at night properly. Or the sleep doesn't happen at night properly, meaning that the body doesn't get to heal, and the experiences of the day, of the week, of the year don't get digested properly. And so there's this whole psychosis, anxiety, depression, all sorts of things happening because of this mismatch between our external worlds and the human made external world and the natural external world, which is there to assist us in it's not there to assist us. Let me rephrase that. We are the ones humans are the ones who have adapted to the natural world. We've evolved to include the natural world's rhythms. And now we no longer respect that.
No. I think the problem is, as you said, we're so busy that there isn't that natural up down energy that is part of the natural part of the day. Because so many women in particular will be coming home in the late afternoon. And it's not just the meals we're trying to get as much our food, our main meal of the day and our main nutritional intake. But we may be starting almost like job number 2 if you have a family. And a lot, so some of that work is physical, but a lot of it's mental, a lot of it's emotional labor for women. Um, you know, kids' needs, partners' needs, parents' needs, whatever our family situation is. And that takes a lot of mental thought when that's really better energetically in the morning. But then we're busy with other mental thought that isn't even our own, really, our own personal. It's are imposed from our employers. And we haven't been able to move either because how many times in the day aren't we just sedentary in the workplace we come? And I mean, I know that you go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting with no break. And where I work, they like lunchtime meetings too. And I was like, do we really have to have another meeting at lunchtime? There's never a break. And so you don't get the chance to go and move that much physically unless you get up from your desk and make a conscious effort. And so everything gets out of sync.
And what you described is basically the corporate world. And there are many women who are on their feet all day
Oh
long.
yeah.
They're doing more service type jobs
Oh yeah.
where their time isn't their own, where they need to serve the person
Mm.
when the person is there. Or there are moms who are, they're doing both. And then when the children are there, they're the ones who have to do this. Or, another scenario is the solo entrepreneur who is constantly is at the computer now because they are under pressure to produce, to be, so it's no wonder that after years and years and years of being out of sync with the natural cycles, the solar energies of the world, and the way the body moves the flow of energy through their system, by the time they hit 35, 40, 50, perimenopause, menopause time, they are angry. They are emotionally unstable. Their digestion starts slowing down because there's no longer this ojas, this youthfulness that can overcome anything. It's like, it's just tired. Done. The body is saying, no more. I cannot do this. So this is why we're seeing so much um, overwhelm. We're seeing burnout. I wouldn't even be surprised that a lot of the brain fog is happening through this. Even ADHD type lack of focus gets heightened because we don't start with that original impetus of life where we need to intake food, assimilate the food, eliminate what's not needed anymore. And I'm talking food as food. I'm talking water, liquids are not being done that way, as well as anything of the mind. Oh, that reminds me. One of those systems that I forgot to mention, which is super important, is the mind system. And that's also another flow.
Yeah. And similarly, like you reminded the mind, well, in Chinese medicine, each of the organ systems has a mental, emotional component to it. So if it is out of balance because of the way we live our lives, then we're not just out of balance physically, we're out of balance mentally and emotionally. And that leads to, if your liver system doesn't get a chance to work, that's related to anger, rage, resentment. Those are common things that really come up in perimenopause. Or we feel heightened anxiety and overwork of the mind. That's the spleen system. It's out of balance. Or if we look at the lung system, that's grief that we find hard to express. So we've trapped a lot of grief in the body. And or each of those go on like that in such a way. And when we, as you said, this is a very major juncture in our life, perimenopause, menopause. It's a major transformation. But if we are so depleted energetically when we get there, it then makes all of these things that we might have been able to sort of half manage prior to that just come to the fore. And so we see a lot more, not just physical symptoms, but an acceleration in mental and emotional things, as you mentioned, brain fog, anxiety, difficulty sleeping, feeling angry, feeling pissed with the world, basically. And this is all of this. The body's saying, I just can't do this anymore. I haven't got any more reserves left for this additional transition.
Right. So there is one that one glaring emotional imbalance that happens also, which is depression. Depression is also another one of those things in Ayurveda. So we're looking at the clock where it's split into the doshas, right? In Ayurveda, each of the doshas have a both positive emotion as well as a negative emotion. So depression is connected to kapha, which is connected to water and earth because it sinks down. Then anger, jealousy, burnout, all of that is connected to pitta. So that's too much of the fire element.
All right.
Right? That's too so pitta is the fire element with a little bit of water, and it has to be that way because the body it'll burn literally if there isn't something to to hold it down. And it has to be balanced with the kapha, so it has something to burn off. So those are all those anger, jealousy, what you attribute to the liver is part of the pitta dosha, middle of the day, middle of the night type thing. And then vata is the one that has um the anxiety, the overwhelm, not so much brain fog, because if you think about the word fog, it's a combination of air and water. So it's a
Yeah.
combo
Yeah.
of vata and kapha. But so it's got the spaciness element. Vata has so people, forget where they're going. Forget what, you walk out of one room and into the other and you go, what did I do with my glasses? Oh, it's on top of my head. So each one of these are connected. And so if the cycle is broken of the day going from vata to pitta to kapha and so on and so forth, then you're breaking the entire cycle. And you're more likely to have that. And during peri, your body is just saying, I'm done. Not only is your body saying that I'm done because of just breaking those cycles, but we women have been cycling through since the for some, age of 11, 9, all the way through having pregnancies. Each one of these cycles also are cycles within the cycle for the human, right? And so
Yeah.
so these things also kind of break the system, and unless we address them, unless we consciously say, well, let me do, because sometimes what we're talking about is another place for overwhelm. Oh, I have to eat and change at this time of day. Oh, I've got way too many things that need to be done in the morning. That means I'm bad. I can't, whatever goes on in
Yeah.
the mind, whatever story. So the best things that we can do is just simplify these activities. And what's great about current health systems is that they're beginning to acknowledge that, yes, we need to
Yeah.
go to sleep at a certain time. We need to have darkness to go to sleep well. We do need to wake up at a earlier in the day. It doesn't mean that we have to do all those productivity things early in the day, but we just need to wake up, and we need to eat in the middle of the day. And if we just start paying attention to those things and then expand from there, dropping in one small thing after another until it becomes habit, until you can shift the outer world into something that makes sense, that's rhythmic for you. It just I cannot tell you the benefits of just adding one slight shift into your day, because, perimenopausal women, they have enough to deal with, let alone having to deal with, oh my God, the Chinese medicine says, okay, I'm in lung time of the day. I need to do this, right? Or Ayurveda says, oh my God, I've got to do this during this time of the day. I can't. I'm driving my kids to soccer, what, whatever it is,
Well,
so just make sure that in the middle of the day is your largest meal, not necessarily your heaviest meal, but it's easy to digest, and it's warm, so it's easy to digest. It's not this cold thing. Allow nature to have its way, to use the solar energy of fire to feed your internal fire, digestive energy. So just starting with a little bit, and if you work in an environment where you don't have time, you simply don't have time, you're running from one meeting to another.
no,
From an
I
Ayurvedic perspective,
agree. I agree
yeah,
with this
uh,
totally. Yeah.
from from an Ayurvedic perspective, the time to eat your larger meal is between 10 and 2, right? Eh, so what you want to do is you eat between then, because you're not going to have that much. I don't know. Yeah, because I haven't worked in corporate in years. Actually, I don't think I ever did. I've always been somewhat of a rebel. So, so you're not going to have the back to back, but you might have only 15, 20 minutes to eat. So you don't go and spend that time in getting a sandwich or a salad. You bring soup. You bring something and if you need the protein, you bring soup that has chicken in it or whatever protein it is so it's easy to digest. It's ready when you are, and you sit down to eat.
Yeah,
Uh, support, and if you have time, go take a walk, 10 minutes. If you just start with that and eat enough so that you're not starving by the time you get home, you're golden.
I
You know,
agree. I
like,
totally agree. Yeah. I'm so in line with you there that we start one place that we can have some control over without needing to flip our whole world. And you're right, maybe a lunch is a good place to make that start. And I think that's a very good place. I think we know that eventually introducing some slowing down in the evening in some way, even if that's only an hour before bedtime, if you can, that's supportive. And then gradually, making little shifts in aspects of it that if you have a family, they can kind of go along with too, so that you're not in conflict with your family and what you want to do that's right for you, because it's good for them as well. And so beginning to introduce, I do think evening meals are difficult because that's often you have starving children, as I've heard, their mouths are like little birds in a nest, feed me, because they haven't had that much during the day. But maybe you can have some of the meal. May have a slightly bigger meal, but you have some of that meal, but not all of it. Or you have a smaller portion of it. And just sort of ease your way into a better rhythm. And I think that once we get further into perimenopause and over the other side of menopause, and many of our maybe duties that we have in the home do begin to slowly dissipate, especially, and getting your family to cooperate, help more, frees up more of your time to begin to be a little bit more in harmony with your body.
and I just wanted to add, for those women who don't have children, didn't have a choice, or had chose not to have children. Um, I think that the issue for them at this point is that, or they're not partnered, or partnered. Once they start, what happens is that their big problem is that they don't want to cook or cook for themselves, or they all of a sudden are switching from cooking for 4 or 6 or whatever, however big the family is, to cooking for 2 or 1, and
Yeah.
nothing is
Yeah.
made for the solo person who wants to eat healthy. So they have to start looking at other techniques. And so for the solo person who no longer has those same responsibilities, you start at lunch again anyway. What you do is you make sure that you block out time between 12. I mean, this is what I do. It's like I block out time between 12 and 1:30, an hour and a half of time. And I'm serious. An hour and a half of time where I am not functioning in the external world. Um, Sometimes it's impossible, so I shift it. So I might eat before the 12 o'clock time, and then have a consultation or something like that. But you want to have that 1.5 hour time, and I make use of one-pot meals because I'm solo, never had kids, never got into the rhythm of cooking and whatnot, and yet here I am talking about cooking all the time. Um, but Instant Pot, one-pot meals
Yeah.
where it's simple to just have that, and sometimes there are leftovers, and Ayurveda always says fresh foods, but there are ways to mitigate the fresh foods, and remember the fresh food thing is about it comes from an ancient system where refrigeration in a hot climate was non-existent, so
Exactly.
and also, yeah, so you do what you can. There's no strict structure. And that's what Clarissa and I are doing is we're taking these ancient systems and we're translating it into current life and making it work. So there's no hard, fast rules. There are principles and guidelines and going back to the clock itself, you know, even though I don't know how it is in TCM, but even though we're saying 10 to 2 AM and PM is Pitta time, 2 to 6 AM and PM is Vata time, 2 to 6, 6 to 10 AM and let me start that again. 6 to 10 AM and PM is Kapha time. Imagine I'm tripping up on this. You, the audience, are like going, what?
We go,
I have to remember
"Oops."
this. But even though those are just guidelines, because again, it's really based on where's the sun? Yeah. Where is the sun right now? Which is an
Yeah.
easy, simple thing to remember. It's like, oh, if I look up the sun is pretty high in the sky, no matter whether it's winter or not. And okay, so this is when I'm going to eat, when the sun is at its highest. And it may or may not be 3 hours at a shot. It may be something less than 3 hours. Because again, you, as we started, when humans started counting time and measuring time, that's when these these daily clocks came into play. But it's not really about those specific clocks. It's about how energy moves through the system, how we're digesting, and where is the sun? Is the
Yeah.
sun or where is the moon? Is it at its highest point? Because that also has a reflection into how much energy we have.
Yeah.
And where is the darkest time of the night? That too plays into that's an effect.
That's important too. So that we are, and I think all of those advice that you hear generally around winding down, turning down the lights, not eating, snacking in the night, all of that comes from Ayurvedic and TCM ancient principles as translated to sort of modern health coaching, but it's always been there. And I thought I'd throw this one in that the concept of intermittent fasting has always been present in Chinese medicine. You stop eating at sort of 7 at night and you don't eat again until 7 at morning. So that has always been there as a sort of baseline rule. How hard it's been followed, I don't know, but it's sort of been there. So it's nothing is new under the sun, I think is what I would say. And these ancient traditions give us give us
Wh-
a rule of thumb, I would say,
yeah.
for living.
When I see all those ads about intermittent fasting for this age and that age, I literally just go, really? Because Ayurveda says the same thing. Although I think that what we say, and I want to I don't want to exclude a certain population because there's certain populations or certain climates where these rules don't work in terms of stopping eating. But yes, intermittent fasting. Yes, from an Ayurvedic perspective, in general, you stop eating at 8 o'clock at night. and you start eating at 6 a.m.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
so you've got this if we're doing the ideal clock. So you're not eating. Also, no snacking in
Mhm.
between because you're never
Yeah,
giving
yeah,
the body a chance to completely finish the meal before, and you're not giving the digestive system a time to rest. So yeah, it just blows my mind that that is the case. And here's a really good rule beyond from an Ayurvedic perspective, and I'm sure it's the same thing in Chinese medicine. Um, that that your body is going to give you a true understanding of when to eat. And so hunger and thirst, eat and drink. Hunger and thirst are there specifically
yeah,
for that. So the rules are simple. Don't eat when you're not hungry. Eat when you're hungry. Don't drink when you're hungry, and don't eat when you're thirsty. And so the problem again, and this is the same thing, is that we've moved away from nature. We don't understand the physical symptoms of hunger or thirst. Um, the physical symptoms of the physical feelings of hunger, what that does is it brings up appetite. And what appetite is the body creating digestive enzymes saying, I'm ready for food now. And so if you're constantly flooding the body with food, it's constantly having to use enzymes to create digestion,
yeah,
digestive enzymes. And then the microbiome is constantly at work. And then the biomes that are negative to the body, those are growing because the extra stuff has to go somewhere to something. So it's either going into fat or whatnot, or it's just sitting, being
yeah,
waiting to
yeah.
digest.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely true. And that learning or teaching my clients as well what hunger, eating when you're hungry is a really important thing because an awful lot of people just snack constantly. As you said, the digestive system never gets to rest because it's constantly working. So it's not doing all the other processes that it's meant to do, which is to process those nutrients, store the energy, restore bone marrow, the food, um, eliminate the waste. It doesn't give the liver a chance to do its work and then rest. It, nothing is working. So teaching people to only to eat when there's hunger and then eat appropriately. And there's a big part of eating to 80% satiety, not till you're full and can't move. So there's a sense of enoughness that runs through
Mm,
the Chinese medicine too, that you sit down, when you're hungry, you eat your meal, but you eat till you feel sufficiently full and then no more.
yeah.
Even though that doesn't play out in China where you see people eat these vast banquets and stuff. But in a general rule, that is a way to actually care for the body and respond to its needs in a way that allows it to get what it needs and to work with what you've given it in terms of food and drink.
And in all, Ayurveda is very similar in terms of that. But I think the whole getting back to being out of touch with the natural timings of nature, I think that's the crux of it. That's what starts a lot of these dis-ease states. Is simply being out of touch with the nature, not being mindful of your surroundings, not being mindful of the foods, not being mindful of our internal signals. We're trained to use the five senses to look forward and outside rather than to turn them inwards so that we're we're scanning ourselves. We're asking ourselves the question, what is needed now? What is the connection now? So we've already gone for an hour. We haven't even taken a
We're
break.
going to open up and ask if there are any questions. Yeah. And I can hear someone else coming up the stairs here making a noise. We might throw it open to our audience if they have any questions. Everybody's joined it.
I don't think so. They might just be going about their day, doing their thing, learning a little bit, which is great. All of these this is recorded, and we do put this out as a post on, certainly on Art of Menopausing. I put it in my
Should be
post.
on mine as well. They're coming up on both our platforms. The recordings are there to be shared. You can listen again, and then if you have questions or comments, then we'd love to hear us. You can send it to either of us or both of us, because we will respond.
Yeah,
to anything you want to ask us.
Yeah. So do subscribe. That way you can at the very least get, and you just want to use this as a podcast while you're cleaning or cooking or trying to get away from that boring job, whatever it is that you're doing during your day. We're here every single Thursday. And next week, we'll be coming up with some other new topic, probably related to this, because it seems like we've been going through a series. What was the first one? What did we do?
We talked about Ayurveda and Chinese medicine and their differences and similarities. We talked about seasonal eating last week. In terms of particularly spring into summer. And now we've talked a bit about the day clock. So no doubt we'll be talking more about these kinds of things and how how do we as busy women with busy lives embrace some of these traditional ancient principles to support our health and well-being. Yeah, for an easier menopause or for longevity itself. So if we're not suffering, from severe menopausal systems, and symptoms, what I've discovered most recently is that the women that are attracted to Ayurveda are women who have been focused on their health for a really long time. So, we're not talking about opening a package of something rather than fast foods. They've been focused on their health for a really long time, and they want, they don't want the focus of their lives to be on taking care of their health. They want the focus of their lives to be on their lives and experiencing it and aging well, without dis-ease or a severe decline. Let me put it that way, because we can't really control how age happens, but what aging happens, but we can control the how we manage them and whether or not it's going to affect us in whatever focus that we want to. We can control some of that. I agree. I think I like to describe it as living longer well. And so the longer we can live feeling a sense of wellness in ourselves, in our whole self, mind, body, and soul, I think we are in a really great place to embrace, the years that come after menopause. How many years that is not quite the same as the quality rather than just the quantity. Having had many relatives who've lived to be over 100, I'm not so sure that I would love to be over 100. Those last years are quite different to what's portrayed in media. A lot of time people are asleep and when they participate, they participate. But, you see the decline of a person. And much as you love them, they were brilliant in their 80s and coming up to 90, but there's a real slowing down. There's a completely different phase as the body. We move from a body to a real soul, just a soul in what's left of the body, which has its own beauty, but it's not all about the quantity, the quality of us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think if there are no more questions or none at all, I think this is a really good place to pause and end this conversation, unless you've got something else that you want to add to our natural rhythms, biorhythms, and
No, I think this is a great place to pause and just thank everyone who joined us.
yes, thank you for joining us, and thank you for those who are going to listen to this or watch this on the recording. Okay, so see you next week.
Bye.